Let me see if I can say this correctly. I believe that there's somebody on Reddit who is scared to death of the truth in the Zodiac case. I believe that they know what the truth is because either they had a participation in the events or they are related to and know the people who are participating in the events. I went on Reddit the other day and I had mentioned my theory that they were embedded images in the letters and notes that were sent by the Zodiac. I was talking about the citizen letter. And to prove my point, I simply was trying to point out that the use of a word ever turned upside down had pictorials of a long gun, a sketch of a female, had some legs as a person, and a tiger to represent like a squadron called the Smoking Tigers. The pushback I got was horrendous. I was called names. I was called psycho. I was told to go see a psychiatrist. I was told by a moderator to go fuck off. I said, at that point, I must be on to something. I'm missing something because they are so trying to convince me that this smudge is not a real image, even though you could see the real images. It was visceral. It was hate. It was spewing hate. It wasn't even an inquiry as to what I was seeing. That subreddit that I was on banned me because they said that I used the word proof instead of evidence. That was the rationale. I took a screenshot of that. I thought there's something I'm missing. I have got to be seriously close for these people to be this angry, this visceral, this disgusting in all the things that they were saying. And there was no one that stopped them. Like if I go on Reddit and I say something snarky, then there's a comment that's snarky. They're gonna take away the comment, blah blah blah. These people were being nasty, and it kept going. I'm not saying Reddit as a whole is behind this. I'm saying that there are people at Reddit with power in the moderator positions that are absolutely terrified of the truth about the Zodiac. So the October 13th letter of the Zodiac is the letter that came 2 days after the Paul Stine murder. It's the letter that changed everything in the investigation. It went from the person of interest at Lake Berryessa to a skinny guy with a crew cut, and some glasses that people have been chasing for 50 years who was not the Zodiac. I believe he was the murderer of Paul Stine, but the Zodiac was there by accident. For some reason, he was in Presidio Heights, got out of the cab. The cab went down the street, got hailed by another person. That was a robbery, shot the cab driver in the head, and our suspect, person of interest, Charlie, realized as he was walking down the street that that was a crime scene. That's why he tore the shirt, started wiping down the cab to get rid of his fingerprints because he was a serial killer. And he didn't want to get caught in a crime he didn't commit because his fingerprints got lifted and somehow his fingerprints were on file and get matched. Probably because he was in the military or had a job where he had to give up his fingerprints at the post office or something like that. I don't know where he worked. So I went back to the October 13th letter because I felt like if the citizen letter, which had images in it that were kind of benign, just kind of artistically walking through the head of a serial killer, I knew the October 13th letter was really important because I had found other designs in that letter that seemed to outline the activities of our suspect that evening and that information was being transferred to someone else. I've been telling people forever that a female is a part of the Zodiac crew, and I believe that she was the leader of the Zodiac crew, and that the October 13th letter was a letter to her to tell her what happened that night and the rest of the gang and how close Charlie came to getting caught. And the person that seems to put these letters together in the images is a guy by the name, I believe, of Albert Lee Terry Jr., who supposedly died in 1971. But a subsequent investigation of his death shows that his documents seem to be phony, faked, not real. He faked his death. So I went back to the October 13th envelope, where a lot of the information was for the letter and turned it into a negative, and this is what I found. I believe right there, top left, is a picture of Albert Lee Terry Jr. I believe this person down here in the bottom in the middle is Charlie. Somehow, I think that the bright lines are actually an outline of his movements that evening around the Presidio Heights, down the coast, and back to his house at 2190 Grove Avenue. But what is really super interesting is that I keep telling you that there's a woman involved in the Zodiac case and that she is the most powerful person. You see over here to the right where it looks like 2, right? That's also a code about the runways at NAS Alameda. But remember how all these letters say to the editor? To the editor is 2E, to Eland. There is an embedded picture of her in pants, coat, looks like a vest, dark hair, and it says E. Whether you believe this is evidence, a smoking gun, or anything else, if I was an investigator, in the most important letter in the Zodiac case, the letter that came with the bloody shirt of Paul Stine claiming his murder, and I found an embedded message to an E, to E. And a guy told me that there's a guy whose address in Vallejo matches up perfectly with the timeline of the murders from Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs, and telephone calls to the police stations in terms of Google driving from the scene of the crime and walking to the telephone at Springs Road in Tuolumne. And his name was Albert Lee Terry Jr. And that the associated person was Charles Arthur Lech. I would investigate that just based on this. In a case that has found nothing of any significance in 50 years, this image inside this letter is not an accident. It is not a smudge. To editor is to Eland. All these people are self-identified in the Zodiac codes. In the Z408, you can find Albert Lee Terry Jr.'s name as a truncated version of his unique listing in the 1978 Vallejo telephone book. If you find a picture of Albert Lee Terry Jr. and he's balding in the middle and looks like this guy to the top left, Charles Arthur Lech is your guy. Because his name comes from the Z13, his first name and his nicknames, and he put his last name in the Z32 Mount Diablo map code. And somebody on Reddit with a lot of power is absolutely terrified of this information.